We got Matt Freeman standing by in the bullpen. Pete Souza. We are live in Manhattan Beach. Basketball game tonight. UC Irvine, UAB, ESPN2, NIT. I'll be on the call. And of course, Matt is waiting in the wings now. He's ready to go because his game, the first game on the docket on Thursday, Alabama and BYU. Matt, your work with Vanquish is remarkable, and I love your deep dives into these films, and it's cool to talk with you about this. The matchup in itself, Alabama and BYU, what sets up for BYU to be able to win and pull off the upset? What do you like about the matchup?
Yeah. I mean, Alabama is they're a good offensive team, right? Like that's what they do. They get up and down. And I was watching a few of their games and just the pace that they play at. You know, like even St. Mary's, who likes to slow the game down. I was watching the first half of that game, and they just get up the floor, you know, makes, misses, which is great. I love that type of basketball. And it's kind of interesting because, Coach Young at BYU here early in the season, especially in the Big 12, as we started, ramping up significantly the level of defense that we were facing after that soft non-conference schedule, he was really trying to get the team to play faster. He's like, hey, we got to pick it up. We got to play faster. And so I know Alabama loves to play at that pace. And BYU metrics wise isn't a super high pace team, but that's a pace that I think BYU is really comfortable with. You know, that's something that they want to run with people. They're always, you look over at the sideline, the coaches are always like, go, 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 after every rebound, after every make. And so that I think sets up pretty well. It's a bit of a strength on strength thing, right? Like everybody's been talking about. The offenses are kind of just, let's see who can get more points, make more shots, and we'll see which defenses can hold up. So I think pace is one of the things that actually sets up pretty well for this BYU team to kind of counterattack. I was watching the Missouri game earlier that just kind of crazy 110-98, just flying up and down, both teams just kind of scoring buckets over and over again. So I think that's one thing that is actually going to really help BYU to push them to play faster, to get downhill more. And then Alabama, usually sets up. They threw in a little bit of kind of showing at the ball screen with St. Mary's. St. Mary's is so ball screen dominant that they wanted to shake that up. BYU can get there. If you're going to give it to them, they're going to run ball screen over and over. They started the game Wisconsin running a ton of ball screens. And then as the game evolves, they really will just see what you're doing. And then they're going to throw some other stuff at you to see what you do. So their base ball screen coverage for Bama a lot of times is this deep drop that BYU loves to attack, especially the pairing of Dallin Hall and Fus Troyore, who Dallin will come off. He'll try to get the defender in jail. Fus will drive and dive right into the big and kind of try and seal him low for either a dump off or a layup for Dallin. And they've got really good chemistry for that. So I think there's a few things, even schematically, that BYU can get to offensively. And it definitely, it seems like what a lot of people are saying, right? First to 90 might win, first to 100 might win. There might be a ton of points going up tomorrow.
But that's a lot of fun. Like you said, that's kind of basketball we love. And so that would be a great way. I mean, even for the tournament itself and for CBS and Turner and all those properties to have a real exciting game to start things off on Thursday night. How different is this? Because I think it's a really cool time, especially with Utah just hiring Alex Jensen. I think there's a lot to be said for the work that Kevin Young has done, just so quickly implementing like that NBA sort of mindset and, all the things about his program that mirror, right, pro basketball. What have you noticed on the floor has been different with BYU's attack and what they do this year? It's different from what they did with Mark Pope. That's been successful for them. That comes from, maybe some of that NBA language that Coach Young speaks.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a difference. This team's roster upgraded in a few ways. It was really rough losing all the people we lost. We'd love to keep Jackson Robinson. We'd love to keep Noah Waterman, Ali Khalifa. But the way they were able to build the roster, one of the biggest things is having a talent like Jaeger Demon. Dallin Hall is a great point guard. Jaeger Demon, great point guard. Both of them being able to run the show, the whole time has been really helpful for what Kevin Young wants to do. And then I think, there's just an attention to detail. Coach Pope was great at it. He did really good, obviously last year. And then this year, Kevin Young as well kind of continues that, being able to say, okay, this team's guarding a certain way. I'll catch them in that way, and it's an interesting thing with this year's team. They started off, the Big 12 so slow, were just getting in their own way, trying to wins. And I think part of that was a chemistry issue with a lot of the new roster players. But then they really started.
What happened at that point in time? Like around, I think it was maybe January 18th or February 18th, or when everything changed.
Yeah. So they had a little bit of mojo. They had just beaten. I can't remember who they just beaten at home. It might have been Baylor, actually. Just had this great game, kind of like we might see tomorrow. Just high scoring, really exciting game. And then they went over to Cincinnati and they just got beat up at Cincinnati. Competitive first half, and then the second half, Cincinnati just said, we're going to do whatever we want on both sides of the floor. And then you're in this West Virginia game right after that, kind of a tough swing coming out all the way from Utah to go Cincinnati to West Virginia.
Yo, dude, what a reminder of right now going through like the rigors of a Big 12 schedule. Yeah, I'm already exhausted again. It's almost like the tournament's easier.
Yeah. And it's crazy, in West Virginia, stingy defense. They lost their best offensive player, but they were still good. They were beating good teams there, especially there in Morgantown. And this first half that just was like, oh no, is this going to be another one of those games? This could be like TCU where we just can't figure it out and we lose, But they just found something in that second half. And in the post game, they talked about a little bit where they were just kind of like, guys, like, if we're gonna win, like, we just have to take it to the next level. Like, we have to do everything more physical. We have to push back more. We have to fight on the glass more. Everything we do has to be done better. And they did it, and they embraced it, and kind of, the rest is history a little bit there, right? Like, they've only lost one game since, which is crazy in a league like this. They've gone up against good defenses. They played West Virginia again. They played Kansas. They played Iowa State twice and beat them. And so it's interesting seeing that because they were trying to find their way. And then I think, a combination, of just buckling down on some of those details. They played a little bit faster. Kansas State, their first 8 points were off of fast breaks, off of a make or a miss. They started cleaning up the glass better. They weren't getting pushed around on the glass as much. There were times where they were disconnected between the big would box out his man and the guard wouldn't, or the guard would get his man and then the big wouldn't, right? And then they kind of brought that all together. So I think it's interesting watching it because schematically they didn't change a ton. They were still trying to hit the same things offensively, defensively. They just kind of started doing it all better. And I think it was that switch that turned to West Virginia. They did those things. They locked in. They got that big win, first quad win of the year. Had to pull it out late and grind it out. And then just from there, I think, everything just clicked for them. They said, oh, you know what? Like, we like playing this way. It's fun to go get somebody. You watch guys like Trevin Nell that drive some people crazy because he's hitting people off the ball. He's hitting people on the glass. Dallin Hall as well. And the whole team kind of upped their physicality to match what was needed to get some of those wins later when maybe the offense wasn't doing so well.
And it's funny because talking to people around the Big 12 last year, especially when Utah started, they just had a rough year in their first go at it in the Big 12, maybe overall. And I was asking somebody, one of the analysts I work with, why was BYU able to make a smooth transition last year and Utah hasn't been able to? And they mentioned the physicality that BYU played with last year. And they lost a little bit of that out of the gate this year with roster turnover. And, it didn't take them long to get it back. And, you still have a guy like Dallin Hall to kind of lead that movement. And when a leader at the top of your roster is doing it, then it kind of trickles down, right? It's been really cool to see the change. One of the biggest changes this year, Matt, I need you to tell me what happened to Richie Saunders. Did he go to Germany and one of those things with Kobe or LeBron? The guy he's gone from a role player on a very good BYU team last year. You can say a strong BYU team to now people are talking about him being a first-round NBA draft pick.
Yeah. It's been amazing to see. And you saw sparks of it last year. And when you talk about physicality, he's the one that kind of carries the team as well in that point. He's just always go, go, go. I'm going to get downhill. I'm going to, push you off a little bit if you're crowding my space as I'm driving. He was a little inconsistent with the shot last year from 3-point land. And you started to see dial it in towards the end of the year last year. He started to have some really good games from 3. And that carried over to this year. And then I think, just another year, I'm sure having a staff and continuing that player development, just different coaches see different things, right? So you get someone else who maybe has a different angle on something and is able to point out something that you haven't pointed out before. And then I think the thing about Richie is he is the perfect player to play off advantages. And when you have a playmaker like Jaeger Denman, who's creating those advantages, who can find people who can play. And then when you have, a style and the sets that they like to go to, the way they use the angles to run him off of stuff, if you give Richie a head of steam, that's all he needs. And once he has a head of steam, once he has an advantage, he's just going to take it. So I think they were trying to find themselves earlier this year, right? Who's going to be the one that takes all the shots? And I think Richie just stepped up and said, I'm going to be the guy that takes the shots. And he wasn't able to do that by the staff. And he stepped right into it and just started making a bunch of shots, right? And never really slowed down. It's been amazing to see what he does. It's kind of I think he had 25 against Wisconsin. And I was kind of like, oh wait, Richie has 25. Like, that's crazy. Like, you feel his, his impact on the game all throughout, because he's such a high motor player. But then sometimes you look at it and you go, oh man, like he's been stacking these points the whole game. And by the end of it, it's like, without Richie, who's really been that stabilizing force the whole year. And then they've continued to find ways to put him in advantageous positions. He's a great player to play with an advantage. He might not be, he's not the greatest isolation player. His handle could tighten up a little bit, but when you give him a little bit of an advantage, that's all he needs is a tiny bit. And he's driving right through someone's chest, either going right up or multiple, pivots in the lane to find either hand to finish on. So it's been awesome to see.
You know what I noticed too, like down the stretch in the season, there was that game at Arizona where it's like, Richie got that call, right? When Trey Townsend didn't down. But then the very next game you guys were playing, I think it was the very next game, on the road at Iowa State, and he draws another call late. And at some point it's like, okay, this isn't so much about bad reffing or bad defense. This dude's getting calls. He's putting himself in positions to receive favorable calls from referees. Like, that is a skill unto itself. Yeah.
And he's done a great job at that. He plays so downhill that I think he's started to learn that. I joked with one of the games, it might have been Iowa State, that he's finally taken the last step of his offensive evolution. He's become a foul baiter, right?
Yeah.
But in that game, he didn't really, like, he was getting fouled. Iowa State's a physical team, but he shot like 13 free throws, I think, in that game. I think he was 13 for 13. But yeah, I think he's really just embodied that. You know what? I'm going to get downhill, and that's something BYU's kind of lacked in the past at times. Is we get in these end of game situations, and it's like, let's just get someone going downhill and see if we can get some free throws out of it. And, the Arizona game, the Iowa State game, it worked.
First Sweet 16 since 2011 for BYU. How, or does this at all set up for the Cougars to make a run to the Final Four?
Yeah, I think, they just keep doing what they do, right? So at this point, it's like, you kind of feel silly not believing in them, especially if you're a fan of the team, right? Because they just keep beating good teams, and they do it in a variety of ways. The formula is about the same. But, no matter, VCU hit 15 threes, BYU wins, Tonje goes for 37, BYU wins. Curtis Jones turned into Steph Curry for 7 minutes in the Big 12 tournament. BYU found a way to win, so it's almost right now as a fan, it's great because we're feeling super high on this team. It's like, what can't we do? Why not go to the Final Four, right? Like, and Alabama sets up to be a decent matchup. They are solid defensively, but I think BYU can get to some stuff. And BYU has shown, it's even against, as long as your name's not Houston, we kind of joke sometimes over in kind of on BYU Twitter. As long as you're not Houston, BYU is going to find a way to put 80 points on you. So it'll be really interesting.
By the way, so does everybody else in the Big Arizona. Tommy Lloyd literally says the same thing.
Right. They're such a tough team. But, Duke is going to be a huge, obviously, as everybody's saying, Duke is, it might be Duke's tournament to lose. They're so good offensively and defensively. And that type of pairing, as good as the Big 12 was, those teams that are good offensively and defensively, BYU hasn't seen that much. And so that obviously would be the big challenge. No surprise there. But yeah, at this point, we're like, this team just keeps finding ways to win. So we're just going to keep enjoying the ride, and why not go to the Final Four,
Why not us, baby? Matt Freeman, thank you so much. Basketball analyst and Vanquish the Foe. Matt, I'd love to have you back if we can get a BYU win. So let's make it happen.
Sure, yeah. Sounds great.
Yeah, you do a great job, and I really appreciate the time, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
All right, let's go Cougs.